LDComics is a women-led, welcoming to all forum run by creators. We champion the graphic novel form, particularly works with an autobiographical voice. Our activity is towards supporting and equipping graphic novelists, especially but not exclusively people identifying as women. Established in 2009 by Sarah Lightman and Nicola Streeten as Ladies Do Comics, today LDComics is run by a committee of 6 published graphic novelists: Charlotte Bailey, Rachel Ball, Emma Burley, Lou Crosby, Wallace Eates and Nicola Streeten. From the start, the core of LDC's activity has been the monthly meetings, hosting presentations from invited guests to a public audience in a welcoming atmosphere for networking and making friends. The introduction of LDC online monthlies aims to replicate the joy and stimulation of our physical meetups. Everyone is welcome.
Yay!
Cool. Thank you. Let me see if I can. I just thought it's worth. I did a picture of Wallace a long time ago when I did the blogging for one of the Ladies Do Comics, and also that just so happened to be Rachel's presentation for her work as well. So I just thought I'd get that in there. This is Wallace. This is Rachel. So,
I love it.
So and also Eleanor, you're a big fan of LDC as well. And
I am, yeah. So this is kind of I suppose what I think we could say about our talk is we're approaching this in a really kind of collaborative way, the same way we've approached our comic. And so I'm just a big admirer of comics. You know, I'm usually sitting around being a medieval historian, and my entire house is just nothing but I live in a pile of comics. Actually, that's what my life is like. And I never thought that I would get the opportunity to do something like this. So I was really, really lucky to, when I came up with this project, and to meet Neil and be able to actually participate in this, because I've read a lot of your work. I'm not going to be a weird fangirl about it or anything. It's going to be very calm. But so for me, it's just kind of like a dream come true to be here. It's really exciting. Yeah,
we're totally fan people.
We're fan people. Yeah, it's a so I guess that what I was going to say about myself here, I hate talking about myself, but that's fine. So I kind of got into this, as I say, you know, I'm not a comic maker, but I'm a history maker, and I do a couple of different things. So I have a blog called Going Medieval. I do now some television for History Hit TV. So I've got a couple of TV programs there, specifically about the medieval period. I teach at the London School of Economics, and I'm on every podcast in the entire world, and I'm on Twitter at Going Medieval. And like that's what I do with my spare time, is I try to get ordinary people interested in medieval history, which it's going so-so. It's going so-so, but you know, I think the comic's going to help me out with that, so that's going to be good.
That's going on to my team background. This is Phil Harding. I worked for the show for 10 years, and I was one of the team that did a lot of visualization. In there you'll see I'm the 2D, I'm the guy with the hat. I did the 2D and like graphics. The guy in the middle did Raysan did the 3D, and then Victor did the illustration. So I was always jealous of Victor's work, so I'll talk about that in a bit. But I actually, even though I did motion graphics and graphic design, and I think I was sort of in the closet as an illustrator, I really wanted to be doing Wallace's course really when I was at university. So yeah, I should have been an illustrator right from the start. But yeah, I was always into comics, but also drawing. And I even did, I started to get into a world of scribing where people would like illustrate meetings and all that kind of stuff. Actually, I mean, the reason I'm bringing that up here is because it sort of, that way of thinking helped inform a lot of how I illustrate these days and how I tell stories. So sometimes one picture might contain micro pictures within it, and that's something that I liked. I think hopefully that comes across in our book. I also did a lot of from working on Time Team. I had a lot of contacts that asked me to do historical work, And so I kind of ended up developing a lot of woodcut style, a lot of medieval style, which kind of is sort of how I got into doing the book, our current book. But at my heart, I think comics is where it's at. Yeah. Over to you, Eleanor.
So I guess how this all started out is that I do other public writing. So the major thing that I do in terms of that now is my blog, which is, I found a good way to get people interested in medieval history, because one of the big problems that you have as a medieval historian is, no one has any background with it. It's just not something that we're taught. We kind of get a real thin veneer kind of gloss. You know, we get taught there's Rome falls, everything was bad, something 1066, Magna Carta, the Renaissance, and that's what we get taught, right? So I'm kind of always trying to insert myself in front of people in a way to tell them about this 1,000 years of history that they are missing out on. And I started that off with my blog, as I say, and that is a fun way of doing it, because a lot of the ways that I can start talking to people about medieval history are based on stuff that's happening. So I've got headlines here. This one that I wrote called "There Are No White Knights" is about kind of conceptions of, you know, good police that I've written in the context of Black Lives Matter, and tying that to the way the world was policed in the medieval period, which is to say that, again, you've got this one group of people who can commit illicit violence, blah, blah, blah. You know, I've been writing a lot about the Black Death lately, because obviously we're living through a pandemic ourselves. The Black Death was much worse, just so you know. I'm always underlining that, but so that's kind of where I got my start. And now I do other public writing as well. So, for example, I will write for the Washington Post, places like that, who have asked me to kind of come in and do the same thing for them. And that is where I kind of got the idea to do the comic, because I thought that a great way to actually present people with a lot more history than I ordinarily do would be by having a comic which draws people in and says, oh, well, this looks like it's fun, right? Because with the comic, we're offering so much more, because we're offering this art, and we're offering another kind of point of connection other than just writing. And I was really interested in that particular part of it.
Okay.
That's you.
Oh, I know. Got to get there we go.
Oh yeah. Oh gosh, sorry. Then also, I hate talking about myself. It's going to be fine. So then the other thing that that has sort of got me into this is through doing TV and things like that more often, because that has been it's been a really fruitful exercise in terms of learning how to make visuals for other people. So, you know, I'm great. I can show you a picture and I know what I want to have in my head, but I just can't draw. I need Neil for that. So I've been doing more things like television where I can block it out. You know, I can find a place like this is a medieval barn out in the countryside in the fens that I found in order to make a television show about medieval peasants. And so I can find things like that. And I know how to explain to people about medieval peasants if I don't have to do the picture. But then what happens if it turns out you're a really big comic fan and you want to do comics, and then you've got to go find yourself a Neil, and that's that's what happens instead.
Yeah, it's difficult because I'm the other end of the spectrum, isn't it? Like I need content. You know, I would definitely, even though I've worked on lots of history shows, I just don't have that level of expertise to be able to speak with authority, and that's where for me you come in. I need an Eleanor. Everyone needs an Eleanor. That's what I've come to discover for sure. So just getting on to our book, the Middle Ages, a Graphics Guide. I just thought we'd just show what the publisher does, because they do a whole bunch of different kind of topics. Yep. And in one of these pictures here, we've got gender graphic guide, and actually that's how you kind of you got into it.
That's right. Yeah. So my mate, Meg John Barker, has written a couple of these, and they had written one of these already. They'd written the very good Queer Graphic History. And it's very rightly beloved and everyone thinks it's amazing, because it is. And I was on a walk and chatting with some of my friends about this when we were in Oxford. And I was kind of trying to figure out what it was that I was going to do with history. I was really in a place where I was extraordinarily frustrated because, academia is a garbage fire and there's no jobs and it's terrible, as I'm sure you've all heard. And I was sort of wondering how it was I was going to do history as a living, or if I was going to be able to do it at all. And we were chatting about Meg John's work, and my husband said to me, well, yeah, but why don't you write one of those? And we actually stopped walking, and I was like, yeah, why don't I? That's a great question. So, and yeah, my husband is here behind the computer telling me that he meant it kind of as a joke at first, but then it happened. So then I went to Meg John and I said, can you tell me about this? Do you think this is something that would work in terms of doing medieval history? And they said, yeah, I absolutely do. And then I got kind of like, the friendship passed through, where they gave me what their proposal was. So I knew how to write it up really well in terms of ones that were already accepted, and kind of passed it to them. And so it's quite funny, because I took this big leap of faith as well, because I had no idea what I was going to do in terms of an illustrator. I just knew that I wanted to do a comic, and I was like, well, surely I'll just find someone who knows what I'm talking about and is immensely talented. That'll be a thing, but look, it was. So I wasn't wrong, right?
Well, it's kind of like funny because how I got into it was actually through Wallace. I know I'm giving Wallace loads of checks here, but it's true. Like I did. I think Wallace saw a message from Icon Books. Someone, I don't know if it was Carrie Fransman, maybe someone passed on a message saying, oh, we need a medieval illustrator. And so, yeah. And because of my history of work, I was like, oh yeah, that, I was kind of appropriate, I guess, for the job. And then I met you, and we were all very professional, meeting at Somerset House, I think. And then as an introduction, it was, and then we started to get to really like, to the actual book. And I think the first job that I had for the book was actually to do the front cover. And that was front covers I've done a children's book before, and I remember the front cover being really problematic. It's like, you got to make it look really, really, really nice, capture people's attention. So what we did is we went through a series of different kind of designs, and that's what you're seeing here, just to kind of, get some options. And then we settled on something which I think worked really well. I was really pleased with, and we're able to also put Joan of Arc on there. So, featuring, a woman actually on the front of the cover as well, so that our book is not just about men in history, which is also what a lot of the topics that you talk about are to, to dispel myths about the past, that, it's just a male patriarchal kind of story, history going on. And so then we obviously got to do the back cover, got to do the front cover.
I love the back cover, it's great though.
yeah because it's all based on like how medieval books are presented, so those borders are sort of replicating the gold and the metal and all that kind of stuff, and embellishment.
Yeah, so how we did it is it wasn't done when I met you, but I was kind of in the middle of it. And how I was writing it as a process was, I knew that I had a certain number of words per page. So it was 140 words per page. And I would write a block of text that I wanted to be at the top as I guess narrative text, more like, so that's sort of like where the actual information is from. Then I would have, you can see here in the white text, that would be in a speech bubble. And then underneath that in brackets, I would put ideas that I had for pictures. So I would sort of describe what it is that I wanted to put there. And a lot of times I would include medieval pictures. So I'd say, okay, well, here's an example of X from the medieval period. So can we adapt this? Which is one of the things Neil's been really great with. Poor Neil, though, the number of maps I threw at him. it was just, you know, maps over and over again, because I'd be like, oh, we need to talk about Alexandria. We have to talk now. We need to talk about here. Now we need to talk about there. And there was just a constant barrage of maps, but you found ways to do it that were fun, which is important. So
maps have been following me around throughout my whole career. Like it's just like they always crop up. I actually do like genuinely doing maps, and it's great to actually do it for this book, because I was able to kind of be very playful with it and also set my own style of how I wanted to do it. And it's actually a little bit more challenging to do it for a book than a TV show, because you've got to kind of get all the information in one page, whereas you can actually bring on sections if you're doing an animation. So it's kind of interesting how to work around that. And I guess like so we started meeting up as well, didn't we?
Yeah, so we started off doing everything in person. So before COVID, we used to go hang out and drink too many cups of tea, and then work on this. So I just kind of have a look at the book, at what I'd written, and then we'd just sort of have a chat and work through ideas about what it was that we wanted to do. After COVID, obviously that went out the window. So we just had about 1,000,001 Zoom meetings instead.
That was quite good though.
It worked, yeah.
Although I like meeting up in person on a one-to-one personal level, but like in terms of, for me as an illustrator, I've just got all my equipment right in front of me, so I can just get. So, but the style of how I did it was using my graphics tablet rather than a piece of paper. But it's just like seeing both those before COVID and after COVID kind of worlds. It's kind of interesting. I guess the flow stayed the same more or less, though. You know, we're still working with your script and words, and we were able to kind of work together actually, like to make the book better than if I'd have just if you'd have said to me, Eleanor, go off and make those pictures, I would have had loads of questions, and I probably wouldn't have made the pictures that we wanted. So having you actually work with me and having those sessions really I thought it was quite special as a creative, like, and you know, you were able to kind of make my pictures better, and sometimes I felt like I could maybe say, well, what happens if we do this, you know, we could add an extra joke in here, or
definitely. I thought that, well, I was always laughing because when we did it a lot of the time, what my ideas were for art were more simplified, and you were always and forever making it more complicated. And I was like, mate, like, what are you doing, giving yourself more work? But you were always like, oh yeah, we could do a crowd scene, we could add this, we could add that, and it would be almost without fail, you gave yourself more work. And I was like, well, he's doing it to himself, so it's fine to sign off on this. Like, it's all right, it's okay.
I did not know that. No, I
thought no, that you definitely did. Come on.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. No, but like I just want to make the best pictures that I can make within the time, and to speak to your work, you know, because I feel like there's a responsibility for me to kind of meet your expectations as an author, make your words really kind of make sense and complement them as well. So it's kind of so sometimes it's, you know, you've got to add in some of that extra detail of crowds or whatever, because you know, like the Nika riots, we need loads of little people fighting.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, I really like that one. Or one that I really liked at the very beginning, we kind of had an idea of showing where the kind of great migrations happened during the age of migration, and it was where people came from, you know, across the steppes, and where they settled in Europe. And I was saying, oh, we can just have little arrows, and you ended up drawing a bunch of people who were embroidering in their place on the map. And I remember just being so taken with that and thinking like, oh, this is great. You know, this guy knows what's up, you know.
Thank you. I guess we had like perfunctory sort of like things to think about as well, you know, like what font to use and how to do the balloons, and actually throughout the process I did balloons in Photoshop at first, and then I was in a certain way which didn't work, so I kind of reconfigured and tried to make them a bit better. So there was an artistic learning curve as well for me to sort of get the process right. This is pretty much wearing the same clothes today. But yeah, just so you could this just show everyone our kind of our home setups really. This is what we're sort of working with,
because it's interesting for me because I used to really work in libraries a lot pre-COVID. And that was a great thing because I never had to buy books. I could just always like get the book, look at it, get the reference I needed, and then send it back. And now I kind of work on a pile of books, surrounded by books I'm constantly picking up. And so, yeah, I just live in a pile of books. That's it. That's all I do, so.
Yeah. It's good. I've got a pile of screens, so
Yeah, clearly, mate.
So yeah, we got some of our inspirations here. I've put Victor in here because he recently passed away, and he was like a really amazing illustrator who had a library in his head of artwork. I'm just going to skip ahead and then come back to your inspirations.
Oh yeah, do it.
Just to show you that basically this is the database that I made of information where I could basically get, find different bits of information off the internet, imagery that I could glom together to make original artwork based on those bits. But Victor did it all in his head. So that's why it's kind of, very impressive.
I've got a kind of group of people who set me off on this path. So there's my mate MJ there with their gender graphic guide. But also included in this, I was having a think and I was like, oh, well, who are the people that I really look up to in terms of this process? And so also my mate Patrick Wyman there. And then there's also Anne Helen Peterson, who I've never met. And why I've brought all these people in is they're all kind of people like me who started off in academia and then said, okay, no, saw this, I'm going to go talk to ordinary people. And I think Anne Helen Peterson is one of the first people who made me realize that was something that you could do, like that communicating your area of specialty to a larger audience was viable and something that people were interested in. And she actually has a PhD in celebrity culture, which is pretty much the coolest thing I've ever heard of in my life, and wrote a blog called The Scandals of Classic Hollywood, where she would have these amazing essays just talking about, whatever a big film star in the 20s got into trouble for. And it was really amazing. And so that kind of got me thinking down the path of these things. And Patrick is a medievalist like I am, and he basically runs podcasts and things like that now. And as I say, MJ, they were doing kind of a psychology-based academia, and they've now moved into just kind of like writing full-time for popular audiences and that sort of thing. So this is kind of a group of people who have showed me all these different ways that you can work with the public and how it is that you can communicate topics that can seem more specialized, but help other people realize that they are actually interested in this as well. And just kind of how do you translate stuff from the library to a larger audience, essentially.
So I am going to do like a combination of reading and sharing some of my process. So I'll just go ahead and get started. I'm going to read, let's see, there we go. An older piece to start, and this might kind of tie into Neil's interest in maps a little bit. So this one's called Hitched. We traveled all over the mainland United States in a big tangled route that had been determined by the trailers we stowed away in. We never left a mess, seeking trailers with the largest black water tanks so as not to cause too much inconvenience with what we did leave behind. We left nice things too, as payment for the junk food and gas. Drawings of the passing countryside, soda can sculptures, a pair of jeans. No one ever caught us. Those old husbands and wives never left each other's driver's sides. We exited their trailers as soon as their car engines whirred off. It wouldn't be a long wait before we spotted the next wife folding up a map, her husband jingling his keys, We'd hide behind a tree or a trash can, listen for the slamming of car doors, and then make a beeline for their unlocked trailer. We saw city lights, mountain streams, desert bloom, Sasquatch, a UFO. It's my elderly cat in the background. We saw aliens too, green slimy things in blue jumpsuits that entered through a window in the roof. We offered them potato chips and boxed OJ. They left the same way they came. We played cards, we played charades, we made meals, we made out, we drew the passing countryside. We drew conclusions like how all those moving houses seem so strange, but not as strange as us moving between moving houses. And how if we could stay in one trailer forever, it would be the one with the pink wallpaper and yellow vinyl chairs. And how those couldn't have been aliens we saw, just some mutual hallucination, some story we concocted together, some charade. The UFO is real though, we insisted. When the tornado hit, we were traveling east from Minneapolis. It picked up our trailer, leaving the car behind. We were looking each other straight in the eye when you were whooshed out of a window. I was whooshed out next. And then everything in the trailer whooshed out, spinning around and around and around, plates, chairs, a television set. And then everything we've ever known was spinning around with us. The trailers, the husbands and wives, our families, our exes, our childhood bicycles, our Legos and Lincoln Logs, all of our pets. One by one, everything was flung to the ground. Your blue bicycle landed in Omaha, my grandmother in Bismarck. I was flung to a cornfield outside of Cheyenne. I don't know where you were flung. I miss you. I'm hitching a ride to Seattle in a 56 T-Bird with a guy named Ace. Every time he changes lanes, he says, "Ace in the hole, baby, ace in the hole." So I wanted to share this one for a couple of reasons, mostly because a lot of my work is wordless. And so when I do readings, it becomes a little bit of a challenge, but this one too, I think a lot of my work deals with loss, and this is doing so in a different way. I use the maps to kind of think about, like we look to maps to help us navigate our way, but really kind of like the state of being is, sorry, let me start this over. My cat was distracting me. But yeah, so I think, I often get asked with this piece, is this a true story? And of course it's not, but I think that question kind of speaks to this fantasy we all have about escape and about being lost. So I wanted to kind of capture that in this piece and use maps as a way to do that there's something really appealing about being lost, about kind of like just getting out there and not knowing what the next thing is. So the background of these pages are made out of cut up maps. These are some of the original backgrounds. And it's very much inspired by the comics form. So, all of the highways that are cut out in that image on the left, I kind of look at as a comics panel. So it's like a weird experimental comics grid. And the same thing with the image on the right, which is just kind of like deep collage, just pieces of paper on top of paper on top of paper. So this idea that this map is really not helping us navigate. It's more about kind of confirming our sense of being lost and that that's okay. And a lot of my work, as I mentioned, does deal with loss and kind of trying to kind of sit in loss as a state of being that is acceptable and real and everywhere. I use lost papers as well. So things like maps, and here, this is handmade paper that's made out of recycled newsprint. And as you can see here too, I cut out the layer on top to make these waves in the vague shape of comics panels. So again, kind of playing off of the comics forms. This is from a piece called C. This is another spread from C. And here too, I'm kind of playing with the comics form. Usually, you know, you would read this panel first and then the next one, then the third one, and so on and so forth. But again, I'm playing with this idea of navigation, thinking about what it might be like to be underwater. So your eyes are following along with these whales and then this school of fish that kind of sweeps your eyes up along the page in ways that challenge our usual ways of understanding how to move across a comics grid. This is another piece called Beached. A few years ago, there were a lot of stories in the news about beached pilot whales. So this is, again, using layers and the comics form to kind of speak to that spatial just crisis. So you have kind of the sea in the background and then the land in the foreground and the whales in between. It might become clear too that a lot of my work in dealing with loss is related to habitat degradation, species extinction, and climate crisis. Another kind of lost paper that I like using is not only newsprint, but the advertisements that you see in newsprint. So you have these like advertisements with these like gorgeous swaths of color. So I cut that away and make these paper forms that I'll then use in my comics. And yeah, I love the idea that you can take something that is designed for commercial enterprise and then transform it into something else. So again, take something that is you know, sort of capitalist and then turn it into something that is a criticism of that. This is from a page that I did immediately after Trump was elected, or not immediately, I couldn't make anything immediately after that, but as soon as I could. And you can kind of see that I'm taking this advertisement for a David Brooks book and transforming it into these dragons. And also this page, you can kind of see that I'm using the part of the newsprint that has the articles written on it as well. Another kind of paper that I've used in the past are sewing patterns. And here you can see that I've cut patterns into the patterns to resemble, again, a comics grid. And this is a finished page from that book called Patterns. So this is the cover for my my published book, non-self-published, In Between. And when Pleiades Press approached me and asked if I would put together a collection of poetry comics, my first reaction was, what are poetry comics? But then as I thought about it, it was like, I guess that there is something that's poetic about the work that I do. I still don't have a pat answer for what poetry comics are, because I think that, you know, what's special about comics is that they are hybrid forms. But yeah, I'm also kind of like playing into the idea of poetry as well. And so we'll play off of traditional poetic forms, manipulate that with the comics form. So these are spreads from a book called Lullaby. The whales you're seeing are the whales that I showed you earlier. And this piece, each spread is kind of looking at a different cause for the degradation of the environment of these orca whales. It's focus specifically on the southern resident orca whales that are endemic to where I live. And so this first spread is on dams that are decimating the Chinook salmon population, which is the primary food source of these whales. You can kind of see here too, again, that I'm experimenting with the comix grid with the bricks that make up the dam that are then echoed in the fragmentation of the ocean on the other side. This next spread deals with pharmaceutical and chemical pollution, very different from the seascape from earlier, where this is kind of much more claustrophobic. Again, playing with comix panels here and the whales kind of moving in between the panels. Boat noise, oil hunger, again, kind of thinking through how all of our actions are kind of entangled. So something that you might not think of as having an impact on these creatures does. And then the final spread in this series is about art and just kind of thinking through my own responsibilities in this and kind of the challenge of making art that is about environmental issues without, making sure that it's not about the art. And there's oftentimes with art such a disconnect between the representation and the thing that you're representing. So trying to kind of have some self-reflection about that. Okay, so I showed this a little bit earlier with patterns that I have a thing for hybrid creatures as well. With comics, when we're bringing together these two forms of representation, it's often word and image, but in working with cut paper, I also like to bring together different image representations. And so you can have kind of a body created from multiple image sources, and it kind of accomplishes a similar thing that you get with word and image coming together. And so I like to play with these hybrid creatures to, again, think about issues related to loss and also to kind of expand on that to think about transformation that comes from loss, so that you can cut something away from something else and put it together with a new thing, create something new and stretch the imagination. So this next piece I'll read is called What Dread Hand and What Dread Feet, after William Blake's The Tiger. And I'll just go ahead and read this. There's nothing like a variety of robots being chained, performing normal behavior. A planet of plastic glows pink. Pink. Like robot, robotic meat. Okay. This next one is called the Columbia Basin Pygmy Rabbit, an autoelegy. And I called it an autoelegy to kind of think about, so this species of rabbit, conservationists, because it was severely in decline, they bred it with a more common pygmy rabbit to preserve its gene line, but that Columbia Basin pygmy rabbit does not exist anymore. Just its genes exist in this new hybrid form. And so I wanted to create this autoelegy so it would kind of come from the perspective of the rabbit, but then also there's this kind of acknowledgement that that is also a human imposition. So this piece is kind of speaking to that. At some point, we became more human than rabbit. And this last image is kind of speaking to the monstrosity of it all. All right, so the last piece that I'll share with you is a very recent piece that I did called Alligator Gut. It's coming up from Shenandoah next month. And yeah, I wanted to, in this piece, talk about a different form of survival. Yeah, a lot of people have been talking about survival and resilience, so I just kind of wanted to reflect that in my work. It's essentially a visual erasure poem. And so I will just go ahead and read it. Alligator gut, a representation of survival with papers, polyethylene, and residual inks. Cluster of thousands of animals and garbage.
So yeah, first of all, I just want to say, yeah, my name is Gordon. So, oh shit, sorry, hold on. There we go. Yeah, my name's Gordon. Yeah, there we are. And I have a brain tumor. And it's an incurable one as well. There he is. I think it's a him. Well, I did call him Rick. Now, this was after many folk were flooding me with hints and tips how to defeat my tumour after I was first diagnosed. I think one of them was turmeric, but I heard it as turmeric. Turmeric. Are you hearing me? Anyway, I was diagnosed in 2012 when I lived in London. I was a fresh-faced 32-year-old. I was innocent, I was naive, handsome. But seriously though, I was shaken by this. I think everyone would be. It was a difficult time, and I felt like I was in limbo. I had no definite things to hold on to. And before I could come to terms with just this initial diagnosis, try to understand it, I was being told that it might be growing into a malignant tumour. Some friends came down from Glasgow and Edinburgh for my first birthday? No, my next birthday. And they gave me Palestine by Joe Sacco. I had not read comics in years, probably since being a teenager, but that would have been X-Men and Spider-Man. But this reintroduced me to this world, but obviously from a very different situation point. When I was back in Scotland a year later, and after my treatment, I was continuing my Sacco catch-up by reading Seferia Garajda. Now, I'd taken in a full splash page. The town's broken main street is lined with men, women and children. The UN are entering the... Getting blinded here, sorry. The UN are arriving into the town. And the men, women and children are lined up. And they're just broken. The street's broken. And obviously I've taken it and I'm taken by it. And then I'm studying the artwork. This Joe Sacco, the artwork's amazing. And then my head's clicked back to what I'm actually studying. How these people have gone through this war alone, looking defeated, crushed. And I was just taken about what this form, how this medium, what it can do. You know, I mean, everybody here knows what it can do, you know. How much closer it can take you into these difficult worlds. If it'd been a newspaper, if I was reading like the Sunday Herald or something, and it was like photographs, I don't think I could have. I don't know if I could have delved that far into that story. I texted my partner at the time and told him about this, and he was like, "Well, why don't you do something with Rick then?" So I did. And my initial idea was to create like a 360-degree view on cancer. I asked friends and family for their thoughts and memories, and they didn't need to be directly linked to me. I received 3 versed haikus and odes, conversations, memories of holidays. I was going to include a chapter on somebody's inability not to do it. Did I say it right? Somebody's inability to not do it at all. There were going to be 9 episodes in total. And here's the 3 so far. And all these things that had come towards me came from my friends and family. They're going to be wrapped around my own story. The problem was, I wasn't going to be talking until episode 5. And I'm not fast, as you can probably tell by how quickly I've spoken so far. A good friend of mine, in a very drunken state, he gave me a constructive crit. These are good, Gordon. They are. But it might only be for folk around you that's interested in them. And you have a very different cancer story to tell. After a very rare hungover apology text from him, the very next morning, I started bittersweet. So, brain tumours are the biggest cancer killer for children and under 40s, yet are still very underfunded compared to other cancers. So in between my story, Dr. Gordon is telling the reader about the disease as well. They can affect your concentration, memory, vocabulary, personality, and more. But you may still look completely normal to others. They may interfere with your job or ruin relationships. Brain tumours are literally head fucks. Thank you, Dr. Gordon. Bittersweet reflects these difficulties in living, the happy and the sad, which often exist at the exact same time. Witnessing the glorious moments, but worrying if you'll be the next, all the next. Sounds horrific, doesn't it? And it is. But it can be like that on its own. How would we survive without any jokes, good or bad? Bittersweet is laden with dark humour, and it must. Confronting your mortality is never an easy thing to do. Fucking obvious, isn't it? Here is a cancer that you're forced to live with, create a new life with. This cancer story could not have an end in this book. Oops, what's that? Oh, sorry. There we go. I mean, this kind of cancer is a bit different. I've been diagnosed with an inoperable and incurable brain tumour. Yeah, I'm still here 5 years later. There you go now. You're kind of fucked, but not for a while. When? Me ideal, mate. Anyway, off you go. See you. Well, see you again at some point. Oh, okay. This is what I expected to be doing in Bittersweet. However, I did not expect to open up quite as much as I did. When still working on the original books, I was noticing the very different responses being used amongst folk. Some I could identify as coping mechanisms. A lassie I knew from my travels in Australia, she filled 2 A4 pages, single-spaced, full of mountains to climb and rivers to cross, only for it to open up briefly, twice. Where was it? Gordon had it. Flash? No. Now, she employed me and she called me Flash within 20 minutes. So, Gordon had it. Not you know, she separated it. But it wasn't until after working in Bittersweet that I realised that Comic Gordon was my coping mechanism. And since, I've formed a strong relationship with him. I knew that the original pieces, those 3 that you can see, Rick 1, 2, and 3, was art therapy for me. But this Gordon was punching me. I'm sorry, this Gordon, I'm reading my things there. But this Gordon was taking a lot of pressure from me. A massive weight off my shoulders. In Bittersweet, comic me was opening up. But here I could still hide from the reader somewhat, hide behind Comic Gordon. It wasn't me that was opening up, really. It wasn't me being brutally honest with strangers. That was comic me. I was still wearing a mask. It just happened to look a lot like me. And masks seemed not to stop there. I inadvertently handed a mask on to comic me as well. When creating him, I was taking inspiration from a few other people, one being Joe Sacco. You can see I'm a fan. That explains the lack of pupils behind the glasses. It was simply a design at first. But as I was going along, I realised perhaps subconscious me had made a good decision in a comic review way. There's one moment where comic me removes his glasses. I had been spending so much time and daft energy deciding whether to fill the pupils in or not that I hadn't noticed quite how strong the impact was going to be until I stepped back. I was royally smacked by that emotional face, staring back at me. How exposed I was. How, especially with being with this guy throughout the comic, the whole comic, and hearing his harrowing story, you finally see his eyes, his entire face, up close, and you're allowed in. The friends who gave the drunken crit that led to the songbook was in the building where the lodge was. And as I was cleaning up, I gave him a copy to read. And at one point I passed him and I was like, "Are you enjoying it?" He was like, "Oh, yeah, fine. Later, we're having dinner." And he actually said, "Actually, if you had not interrupted me, I'd have started crying." Now, if you knew this guy, that would be a big surprise, because I've known him for 35 years. I've seen him cry twice. Once on my doorstep when he was 7 because his granny had died. Another one was about 3 years ago at his wedding. My relationship with Comic Gordon has progressed. He's no longer only a narrator, and certainly he's more open than I am. He can be anyone and anything. He can be butch and a bitch. It was a few days before a small exhibition, and only 3 or 4 months after the Bittersweet launch, that I was told that Rick was in action again. The Comic Gordon narrating Bittersweet was curated at a time when my illness was being quiet. The one I'd been hiding behind, the Gordon who was clean, free from all this shite, was now caught up in all this too. No longer is my coping mechanism untouched. He could no longer be a full obstacle between me and Rick. Let's take a step back for a moment. I'm at my support group's Christmas party. It was only a few weeks after the launch of Bittersweet, and I was talking to Chris. He'd lost his wife Jane in January. He was describing the appointment when the doctor was given the diagnosis. At the end, he turned to Chris. There was something with a smile on his face. It was like, "You're a carer now, Chris." Bye. He hadn't given any leaflets. He hadn't given any carers charities. He hadn't given any websites. He didn't say that the Maggie Centre was 50 yards away. Chris continued with his experiences of a carer. Sat next to him was Alice, whose daughter had the tumour. She was agreeing. Afterwards, she added more. I was quite taken by all of this. I was single when I was diagnosed. I was also very protected. So this side of the cancer story was quite alien to me. There are many cancer stories. There are many people with cancer, sadly. But I didn't find there was too many books that gave space and time to the people next to those with the tumours. The wives, the brothers, the fathers, the daughters, the friends. I felt there should be. I felt they deserved to have one. I thought this was where my next book should be. So I've interviewed carers and charities and benefits advisor. And over the course of this research, it's just grown bigger and bigger and bigger. There is often an effect on our health and our jobs and relationships. There's a political aspect that has been terribly shocking to learn, yet unsurprising at the same time. I want to make a point about these things, such as the effect that cuts have made on them and the difficulties deliberately imposed on the benefit system. And I will. How can I avoid the opportunity to expose this fucking government? However, for me, I've always resolved to bring things back to the carers. They are my primary reason to doing this. I was shown at the moment, out of the blue, Edinburgh until the 25th of June, just found out it's not the 26th of June, 25th of June, I'm not plugging. Honestly, I am plugging. I'm not. I am. I'm not. I am. I am. There's beautiful wrestle prints of Instagram comics I put up last year. It's good to see them large size rather than just phone size. And I got some good feedback. But it's also given me more thoughts. More thoughts on like the structure. I've become aware that holding wholly simply to the carers may not be the best route, despite my first thoughts, that I may need a central story arc to bring these people together. And that arc may be comic me. You see, beforehand, I didn't see comic me playing a large part in this book. He'd be a side character. An interviewer, aye, but not interfering so much with the main characters. And he still won't. The issue was, I had thought that the Rick books were finished. You know, Bittersweet had helped me deal with Rick, the tumour. I was actually saying I'd killed him off. I think this can qualify as a Rick book. This is Rick 5 in effect. Now, don't get me wrong, please. The mainstay still is, and always will be, the carers. This is still their book. But as time went on, and my slow head progressed, I realised that comic me had to play a larger role. This started when I interviewed my own partner, but more importantly, as I said earlier, Comic Gordon is sick now. He is going to need a carer. And they need to know about these things. And these issues are not that far away, sadly. And as he speaks to his partner, Sean, then we will be taking the readers to learn more, because they need to learn more. And then we'll be introduced to Sandra and Anthony and Sam and Chris and a lot more. And that's we finished.